Dean Mercer stood behind the velvet rope at the Ferrari SF90 supercar exhibition when Sadie pointed at the scarlet supercar gleaming beneath the luxury showroom lights. "Dad," she breathed, "that car is absolutely beautiful." Dean smiled like someone gazing at a life he left behind. "Yeah," he said, "that Ferrari is mine." The wealthy crowd erupted into laughter. Tyler Knox judged Dean by his oil-stained jacket and battered old truck, sneering openly. "Sure it is." Even Brooke, the event coordinator, moved in to kick him out. But 30 feet away, Vaughn Performance Group CEO Clare Vaughn froze. She was staring straight at Dean. You might wonder, why would the most powerful woman there hand a total stranger the keys to $1 million Ferrari? The Vaughn Performance Group's annual luxury car show was designed to split the world into two distinct categories: people with status and outsiders standing at the edge pretending they didn't care at all. The dealership floor now looked exactly like a high-end European auto exhibition. Polished marble gleaming beneath track lighting. Champagne glasses catching the glow of headlights, and right at the center of everything, a Ferrari SF90 Stradale and a Rosso Corsa red so deep it resembled frozen fire. The exclusive guest list held 400 names. Every single one a wealthy collector or executive, people defined purely by money, never sweating a payment. Valet in crisp jackets moved through quietly, serving the wealthy crowd with the quiet efficiency of staff paid to vanish. And somewhere right near the back, a jazz trio played Coltrane softly, just enough to project wealth without pulling any real focus. This room tried to erase ordinary men. Naturally, a man like Dean Mercer was not invited. He drove 40 minutes across town in his battered F-250 with 220,000 miles. With Sadie buckled up in the passenger seat, clutching a crumpled school permission slip. It sat in her jacket pocket because he kept forgetting to sign the thing amidst his daily struggles. Sadie was 9 years old and carried the pure, quiet passion of a kid raised around grease and tools and therefore understood deeply, the way only a hard-working mechanic's daughter could, that a truly beautiful engine is worth driving clear across town just to witness. 2 weeks earlier, she found the supercar exhibition poster at a gas station, simply pointing at it in total silence. Dean stared at it for a long minute, then he promised her, "We will go." You see, Dean Mercer rarely made promises, but a man of true value always keeps them. They parked far out in the overflow lot and walked up to a velvet rope that split society into two shallow material halves. The security guard wasn't intentionally cruel, but she was sharp and completely precise. "Wristbands for invited guests only, sir. The public viewing area is over there along the far south wall." So they accepted their place at the south wall, where little Sadie pressed her face tight against the cold glass. Dean stood quietly behind her, hiding hands inside his old canvas jacket, bearing the faded, forgotten logo of a humble mechanic shop time had completely erased. From that humble spot, they had a perfect view of the brilliant SF90 supercar. And Dean stared at it. "You and I know that look, like watching a silent memory of a past life." Sadie glanced up at him. "You always look at Ferraris like you miss them," she whispered. Dean gave no reply. He just kept silently looking. Let's look at the crowd by the rope. They wore watches worth more than cars, bragging loudly about trips to Maranello as if money equals true worth. As though Maranello were a humble neighborhood they had actually grown up in. Tyler Knox stood loudly at the center of that wealthy group. Mid-30s, square jaw. He had that hollow confidence born from never being tested, always surrounded by nodding peers who valued status far more than actual substance. Tyler sold luxury car financing for a firm plastered across the event banners. That title gave him VIP access to the roped-off area and the loose, easy arrogance of a man whose invitation came with a premium parking spot. Tyler noticed Dean the way flashy men always notice quiet builders, very quickly indeed, sizing him up with a lazy contempt that required absolutely no real conscious thought. When little Sadie had whispered, "Dad, that car is absolutely beautiful," and Dean laughed softly, replying, "Yeah, that Ferrari is mine," Tyler turned, judging the worn jacket and the permanent oil staining Dean's honest knuckles. He sneered at the battered old truck visible through the far glass doors. And Tyler laughed the way shallow men always laugh when they want everyone around to know they are mocking someone they consider beneath them. Two of his wealthy associates joined in. A woman in a crisp white blazer half covered her smirk with two fingers, barely bothering to hide her cruel amusement. Brooke Ellison, the stressed event coordinator for that evening, was rushing through the crowd with the focused speed of someone handling 14 simultaneous crises. She excelled at her job, meaning she was an expert at reading these rooms. And that sudden burst of arrogant laughter over by the south partition caught her eye like a minor social mess that she needed to quickly fix before it turned into something ugly. She stepped toward Dean with that polished, perfectly neutral corporate energy of someone preparing to politely ask a poorer man to leave. The kind of gentle warning that never actually sounds like a choice. She was about 20 feet away when she saw that Clare Vaughn had stopped walking. And Clare Vaughn rarely ever stopped walking. She was 41 years old. Took her father's modest dealership at 34, building the largest independent performance car network in the entire Pacific Northwest. Her silent work spoke volumes. She moved through spaces with the calm certainty of a woman who had, long ago, stopped needing to prove her worth to shallow people. She was heading for the product team when her gaze drifted toward that south partition. You and I know true value hides plainly. She simply looked, spotting a man in a canvas jacket behind the glass, staring at a Ferrari like absolutely nobody else in that superficial building was looking. Not with greed, nor the fake, performed appreciation of the extremely wealthy. He studied it the way a master craftsman looks at a legacy he quietly built. Her feet froze in place before she even made the conscious choice. She watched him quietly for a long moment. Then she reached down, unclipped the key fob for that SF90 and just threw it. Didn't hand it over with some polite corporate speech. She threw it clean and flat, 20 feet through the air right at Dean Mercer, as the entire room went dead quiet. The key slapped into Dean's worn right hand without him even seeming to try. A catch revealing that true value isn't owned, it's silently earned. His reflexes were tuned to something far deeper than this flashy supercar exhibition required. The instinct of a man shaped by heavy burdens and moments that truly mattered. He held the Ferrari key fob, looking at Clare Vaughn with a quiet gaze that wasn't exactly shock. But it certainly wasn't comfortable ease. It was the face of someone, silently recalibrating, choosing in mere seconds to keep his rich history completely hidden away. Around this quiet father, the wealthy VIP crowd froze. The jazz trio played 4 more measures before the pianist felt the heavy silence spreading across the luxury showroom, slowly bringing the background melody to a halt. Brooke Ellison completely stopped in place. Tyler Knox spoke first. That's what men obsessed with status do when real presence threatens their shallow hierarchy. You're actually letting him touch that car? He spoke with the forced outrage of a man desperate to prove his worth to an audience of equals. Claire ignored Tyler's fragile ego. She kept her eyes on Dean. She looked like someone trying to see past his worn clothes, waiting to confirm her instinct about his unseen value. I need to see something, she murmured quietly, forcing Tyler to quickly decide whether to fight back or just swallow it. He backed down, but his jaw clenched in a way that revealed his deep insecurity to everyone watching. The guard silently unhooked the velvet rope and stepped aside without a word. Dean handed his daughter the wrinkled permission slip from his jacket. We'll sign that back home, sweetheart. Then he approached the Ferrari SF90 Stradale with the grounded pace of a man who didn't need to show off. He bypassed the driver's door completely. He ignored the flashy interior, the expensive wheels, and the famous prancing horse badge. Moving to the back, he crouched and rested his rough hand flat against the cold engine cover. Not looking, feeling it, the wealthy crowd traded confused glances. Naomi Reed, an auto journalist covering the high-end car show, dropped her lens, studying this humble father with intense focus, her intuition sensing a real story beyond the shallow money of the evening. Claire's operations director leaned in closely and whispered, "Should I stop him?" Claire just raised a single finger, never looking away. Marcus fell completely silent. Dean stood up, walked calmly to the driver's side, and pressed the small remote. He slid into the seat with the quiet grace of a man whose knowledge came from years of invisible sacrifice. You and I know this supercar's interior is intensely complicated. A dashboard displaying more intricate data than a fighter jet. A complex hybrid engine management screen. drive settings wired to a steering wheel built for professional tracks, far beyond standard road use. Yet Dean didn't stare like a man blinded by sudden wealth or flashy toys. He scanned it with a seasoned, quiet mastery, the focus of a man who values deep competence over appearance. He fired the ignition. The hybrid V8 roared awake, settling into the sharp growl of finely crafted Italian engineering. That sound rattled the champagne glasses, and maybe you and I can agree, true power never needs to brag to be felt. I watched Dean sit, resting both hands on the steering wheel, staying completely silent for about 10 long seconds. He clicked the hybrid powertrain to electric mode. While listening to the motor's quiet hum, a deep frown formed. You see, my daughter and I were close enough to catch that subtle reaction the crowd missed. He fired the engine back up and carefully listened again. Claire stood 5 feet from the door, studying him closely. "How did you know?" she asked. The polished executive composure she had maintained all evening was suddenly stripped completely away. She sounded like a person who genuinely needed the truth. "Know what?" Sadie asked from behind the velvet rope. "Because somebody tuned it wrong," Dean replied. He spoke without ego, like a quiet craftsman just diagnosing a clogged pipe in a basement. Calm, flat, absolutely certain. Tyler Knox let out a harsh sound. It was meant as a laugh, but felt incredibly strained. "Some nobody decides the Ferrari engineering team made a mistake," Tyler scoffed out loud. Claire completely ignored Tyler. Meanwhile, Naomi Reed lifted her camera high and stepped closer to the unfolding scene. Dean stepped out of the supercar with the same quiet, unhurried grace he had shown before. He rested the key fob on the roof, turning back to admire the SF90 with genuine, quiet affection. Inside the dark cabin behind him, a tiny warning light glowed brightly. A small, steady amber light on the main display. A few Ferrari product engineers, initially hiding by the back wall, immediately rushed over toward the dream car. They definitely spotted that silent warning before Dean even spoke. They kept their mouths completely shut until now simply because. Nobody wanted the blame for ruining a flashy, high-profile supercar launch event like this. "You and I both know real courage is quiet," Dean spoke up before 400 people and cameras. The lead engineer, a compact guy named Phil Garrett, stepped up. He had faithfully worked in Vaughn's technical division for 11 solid years. He crouched by the glowing panel, wearing the heavy, anxious look of someone desperately pretending everything was perfectly fine during a massive career-defining moment. The hidden fault code was precise. A tiny hybrid torque mapping error, the kind of invisible flaw that standard diagnostic tests would always miss. But it would cause a faint hesitation in mid-range power under a heavy, sustained load. In the grand scope of elite engineering, it was relatively minor. Yet it was exactly the kind of small, unseen failure proving. Without question, someone slipped up between the assembly line and this glamorous, wealthy showroom floor. Phil stared down at the screen, then looked over at Dean. Then he looked back at the screen. He had the face of a man denying an ugly, undeniable truth. Tyler Knox saw a chance to show off and attacked immediately. "Whatever trick he pulled starting it up," Tyler shouted, talking to nobody but projecting loud enough for everyone. Claire held up one hand, never turning, instantly stopping Tyler mid-sentence. Phil finally rose from the glowing instrument panel and spoke softly, but just loud enough for my daughter and the closest crowd. The fault was already there. Without seeking any permission or praise, Dean returned and knelt right beside the rear engine panel. He never asked for tools, which meant he either planned to fix it barehanded or his silent expertise had already solved it while the flashy owners were confused. Real value isn't owned, it's given quietly, leaving a mark time can never erase. People kept their wide circle around the shiny Ferrari SF90. Dropping her fake boredom and ignoring the fancy champagne, Naomi had her camera raised to capture the spectacle. Sadie simply leaned against the velvet rope, her small arms resting quietly on the barrier. She watched her dad with the deep trust of a kid who knew his real worth. Do the impossible quietly, time and again. You and I know true mastery looks effortless. What happened next didn't take very long. Dean worked entirely speechless, moving with the quiet precision of a focused surgeon. Not from being withdrawn, but because an unspoken dialogue was happening between his hands and the machine. And that bond needed zero translation. He quietly tweaked, the calibration interface right through the supercar's main engine access bay. He firmly secured 2 physical wires inside the hybrid unit, then calmly asked Phil Garrett for a single readout from his diagnostic tool. Phil called out the numbers. Dean made one last silent tweak. The warning light vanished. Nobody actually clapped, but a heavy shared breath of sheer relief rippled right through the stunned bystanders watching him. Phil just stood frozen behind his open laptop screen. He looked like a guy who just watched someone effortlessly parallel park a massive semi-truck into a tiny gap meant for a simple compact car. He stared down at his diagnostic scanner for several long seconds before whispering in total disbelief. How did you know exactly where to look? His beloved wife, Paige Mercer, had been gone for 4 long years, and the beautiful career Dean sacrificed to care for her remained a silent secret buried far away from anyone in the United States. What those wealthy supercar owners at the exhibition entirely missed, what the whole American auto industry failed to ever realize, was that Dean had quietly spent 7 years building real speed for Ferrari's elite performance team over in Maranello, and before that 2 grueling years stationed at Fiorano, working the test track, pouring his unseen soul into 9 years of critical development work. He validated powertrains that claimed historic, permanent victories at Le Mans, Monza, and the legendary Silverstone track. His very rare gift. Finding the silent flaws between a car's movement and its internal programming. His real-world tuning skills were so profoundly unique and deeply valued. His old team lovingly joked that he didn't just listen to sports car engines, he patiently let them confess their sins. He was only 31 when he left all that glory behind. You and I know true sacrifice is silent. He never explained why cars shut down for the wrong hands. Dean answered quietly. He spoke without carrying any arrogant weight, speaking exactly like a man offering a simple, undeniable truth that needs no defense. Phil Garrett stared at him, then glanced back at the gleaming Ferrari SF90. Then he looked right back at Dean, rapidly realizing this man's true hidden worth. Dean simply stood up and carefully checked the rear access panel's alignment, snapping it shut with the gentle but absolute firmness of a master who understands unseen forces perfectly. Turning back to Sadie, he asked, "You hungry?" She shot him that skeptical, 9-year-old stare of feeling completely managed. But then she flashed a proud grin. "You just fixed a Ferrari?" "I think I can be hungry." Behind them, the Ferrari roared to life perfectly. 0 warning lights, no more hesitation. Its hybrid system flawlessly cycled through power modes with the exact invisible precision Dean himself had originally designed for them. Phil nervously ran the entire diagnostic sequence twice. Think about it. He didn't doubt the result. He just needed to witness that kind of quiet greatness twice. The diagnostic data returned perfectly clean. The issue was entirely fixed, handled quietly by a man wearing a simple canvas jacket. A man who never even asked for tools or blueprints. He resolved in under 15 minutes what the official North American Ferrari technicians would have easily spent a full, expensive day trying to diagnose. Naomi Reed found a better angle and recorded the moment. She captured footage of the fix she would later write about as the absolute most brilliantly confident mechanical work she had ever seen outside a professional racing pit lane. The wealthy crowd had not moved. Instead, they pressed in closer, the exact way a group of people do when they have been faking boredom and finally dropped the polite act. Tyler Knox remained, but the room shifted. You and I know how empty wealth fades when true competence enters, leaving him entirely on the sidelines. Standing on the edges was deeply unnatural for him. Claire spoke up. "You should come inside the rope." Her tone made it clear this was no question. Dean glanced at Sadie. She was already bouncing off the barrier, radiating that pure, undeniable thrill of a kid who just got invited somewhere special. An employee quickly brought 2 wristbands, and for the next hour, Dean and Sadie stood in the VIP luxury area as comfortably as they stood anywhere else, unbothered by the heavy price tags around them. They existed slightly removed from the stiff, status-driven social games of the room, perfectly happy to just admire the brilliant engineering and quietly enjoy the catered food. Sadie, facing a massive tray of fancy appetizers for the very first time, tackled it with the focused joy of a 9-year-old trying hard to look completely casual. "This is really good," she informed a waiter with absolute seriousness. The waiter looked truly happy. Claire walked over to Dean by the engineering display on the far wall. He was studying a cutaway model of the hybrid engine architecture. She had quietly slipped away from two wealthy buyers without making them feel brushed off. A smooth social trick she had perfected over years of managing these showrooms. She actually preferred observing people of real substance from a distance. She paused right beside Dean and studied the engine block for a moment. She held major weight, even in a room packed with loud, rich egos. Let's be honest, her presence came from something deeper. It had absolutely nothing to do with her corporate title or her bank account. She carried the rare weight of someone whose outward actions matched her silent character. You talk about these cars like family. She spoke softly. It was half observation, half the clever opening move of someone who spent decades making deals by figuring out what people truly valued deep down, and what Dean Mercer genuinely cared about. She realized his true worth had nothing to do with what the other collectors wanted. Dean thoughtfully watched the exposed engine for another moment. I spent years listening to them more than people, he murmured, not a complaint at all. It felt like a quiet truth kept hidden for years, finally spoken aloud just to see if the heavy words still held their steady shape in the open air. Claire took the heavy words in without speaking, showing deep social wisdom. Recognizing that the only proper response to a man's honest life is silence. Little Sadie popped up at Dean's side with a tiny plate of food and the proud look of someone who chose perfectly. She stared at Claire with that pure, unfiltered judgment of a kid, instinctively sensing what you and I know matters most, a person's real character. Did you throw those keys? The little girl asked. Claire smiled. Yes, Sadie weighed this. Good throw, Sadie decided, turning back to her simple snack. Claire studied Dean. Let's look closer at this quiet father. Her face softened, dropping the mask to reveal a glimmer of real respect far beyond the fake corporate smile she wore all day. Dean saw it. He also caught that she still hid how she knew his hidden legacy. And from the precise, calculating gaze she gave him when tossing those keys, he quietly realized one thing. That sudden toss was a completely deliberate test of reflexes. What this humble father missed was this. Claire had spent the whole hour secretly digging into her phone's search history, hunting his exact name buried inside old, forgotten supercar engineering records from a European racing team. She placed her drink on a waiter's tray and spoke. I need you to come back here again tomorrow. Claire was deeply meticulous by instinct and corporate training. After the showroom emptied, she spent 2 hours doing what she always did when faced with a quiet mystery that defied the usual flashy stereotypes. She hunted for truth. Dean Mercer's name survived in Ferrari's vast archives in just 2 quiet spots. An old technical letter, 9 years old plus one tiny mention buried deep inside a private record. The European Performance Branch listed him directly as their chief engine calibration lead, a secret project where his data became the invisible foundation for 3 massive engineering papers. The note was tiny, almost completely hidden. You and I know true respect is silent. Claire knew a casual mention of a single name inside a master file meant earning a profound nod from elite builders who almost never praised anyone. She made 2 quiet phone calls later. Her first call to a Ferrari insider confirmed that Dean Mercer had quietly shaped the Maranello division's greatest machines, but that he had walked away 9 years ago, leaving 0 forwarding address behind in their corporate files. That made sense for a sudden exit, one completely lacking the flashy consulting contracts most senior engineers chased for extra wealth. Her second call went to Warren Hale, the former technical director shaping Ferrari's entire Fiorano testing program. For 20 silent years, now living quietly out in Colorado, helping only the racing teams he respected, ignoring all the rest. Warren answered on ring 4. I was wondering when someone would find that name. The history Warren shared wasn't about seeking glory. Dean walked into Fiorano at 22, a quiet kid placed from a mechanical engineering program uncovered by European talent scouts at a small regional competition. That hidden, humble pipeline only delivered 3 or 4 truly brilliant engineers every decade, and sometimes a rare master. Dean had been, in Warren's eyes, the absolute finest engine calibrator he had ever guided across 18 years of directing. We must remember this, not the richest or most decorated, but the most gifted. a pure, timeless contribution to greatness. Let's look at what happens when quiet devotion and deep skill finally meet. They create something permanent that standard success can never replicate. Warren knew Dean was never wired for the empty pursuit of chasing applause in crowded rooms, choosing to hide his true brilliance meaning. His unseen impact inside the program far outweighed any fleeting public fame outside it. Paige was diagnosed when little Sadie was just 3 months old. The prognosis brought that heavy, profound silence to phone calls, the kind shared only by people facing the quiet endurance of true love. Dean spoke to Warren with a quiet firmness Warren later understood as the quiet resolve of a man abandoning prestige, not asking permission, just stating a selfless choice already made. He was heading back home. He traded his worldly success for family presence, returning to the Pacific Northwest where Paige had loved ones, quietly taking a humble job at a local auto shop where the tasks were honest. The schedule allowed him to be present, and nobody demanded flashy brilliance over simple, steady dedication. Paige survived for 4.5 years, defying the timeline through the grace of his quiet care. Dean poured his soul into the shop, the hospital wards, and raising Sadie at home. When Paige passed, he seamlessly sustained the quiet, devoted life he had constructed around her eventual absence. This is exactly what outsiders, obsessed with status and public achievements, completely failed to understand. You see, grief born from years of quiet, exhausting devotion doesn't shatter a person, it simply extends a legacy of unseen sacrifices built up over time. Now Sadie was 9. She was raised in a garage, watching her father repair everyday cars with the deep, quiet care of a man who found absolute wealth in honest duty alone. She knew absolutely nothing about Fiorano. She knew he once built Italian race cars only from a fading kitchen shelf photo, a glimpse of pit lanes, old helmets, and timing boards from a forgotten, glamorous life. It showed her father's face, younger, before duty weathered his spirit. Yet she inherently understood in the quiet way. Kids sense unspoken truths, that past was sealed away not out of anger but from the immense weight of selfless love. She plainly mentioned to Clare Vaughn at the luxury event, without any fanfare. Dad quit building race cars when Mom passed away. She delivered it like a child, stating an absolute truth, entirely at peace with his enduring sacrifice. The profound gravity of that kept Claire silent for seconds. Later that night, Warren Hale spoke to Claire in his steady, deliberate tone. Dean Mercer was the most brilliant mind I ever knew. The reality that nobody knows his name isn't some tragic accident. It was a deeply personal sacrifice. I urge you to treat his legacy gently. Claire pondered the sheer weight of his silent nobility long after hanging up. By sunrise, Ferrari North America had already contacted Vaughn Performance Group, eagerly chasing a man who valued family over fame. And Claire would have to bring this shallow temptation to Dean, inevitably threatening the beautiful, quiet life he had built. Naomi Reed published her piece 4 days later, driven by a headline coldly calculated to generate the maximum amount of industry noise, entirely missing his true worth. Mystery mechanic solves SF90 glitch at elite luxury showcase. Her article detailed the showcase repair with cold, mechanical precision, highlighting the engine fault, his swift fix, and his undeniable expertise. Yet it failed to mention the humble man behind it. You and I know his worth, but Naomi still hadn't confirmed his name. Naomi was a sharp journalist. She understood that in tales like this, a missing name holds far more weight than a printed one. Real impact is silent. The entire automotive world devoured it in 2 days, spending the next 3 guessing. This was exactly what Naomi had expected. Tyler Knox had anticipated something entirely different. He wasted those frantic days right after the main event, building a hollow narrative where his own corporate team discovered the critical fault, claiming Vaughn's technicians solved it in a perfectly orderly and professional manner, upholding their flashy brand standards while desperately trying to minimize the real worker's role, claiming the nameless man's quiet contribution was minor and not truly important. Let's look closely here. He pitched this fake story to 2 media contacts beforehand. Afterward, his version felt incredibly fragile, like a weak structure built much too close to the waterline. It barely held together. Everyone watching knew time and truth would eventually wash the lies away. By the second day, Claire finally called Dean and asked him to visit. He arrived at the huge Vaughn Performance facility alongside his real wealth, Sadie. Since it was Saturday, the regular elementary school calendar left them little flexibility, so Sadie got a tour of the busy service floor from Marcus, who was quietly restoring 3 classic cars at different stages. Genuine craftsmanship captivated Sadie so completely that Dean could not immediately reach her. By calling out, he physically found her later, covered in hard-earned grease, deeply invested in a complex debate about carburetor settings with an older veteran mechanic. Meanwhile, Claire and Dean sat in her office, holding coffees, watching the expansive lot. Dean silently listened to the hollow outline of Tyler's fake narrative. The Ferrari North America inquiry, Naomi's bold article, and Warren Hale's name surfacing inside. Warren confirmed his knowledge to Naomi with precise honesty, refusing to embellish the quiet facts. "You see his true strength here." Dean said nothing after hearing all this. The Ferrari North America inquiry was remarkably specific. They were building a consulting team for their North American validation program on an upcoming hybrid platform, and they needed to know if Dean Mercer was available. Claire displayed the important email, turning her laptop to face him, quietly observing his modest reaction as he read it. He pushed the laptop back. "They will want someone full-time," he answered. Claire said that was possible. "Sadie is in 4th grade. Dean explained. "She has her entire setup back at the shop. Her tools, her bench, I just cannot uproot her." Claire completely expected his selfless hesitation, having already spent 30 minutes last night outlining a part-time, remote consulting plan that totally respected his family time. She silently slid a paper across the desk and Dean studied it. Warren Hale appeared in town exactly 2 days later. Claire had not arranged this visit, which surprised Dean quite considerably. Warren simply showed up at the humble shop that Tuesday in a rental car with Colorado plates, holding a cheap coffee from down the street, and he casually leaned against the worn workbench while Dean finished a quiet brake service on a regular customer's 3 Series. The 2 men talked the way old friends do when a decade of silent years passes. But all that lost time was easily explained by the profound unspoken things that shaped it. Warren stated simply and directly that he honestly had shared the absolute truth with the journalist, because Dean's silent contribution deserved a permanent record. Accurate. We know true value hides, so he understood if Dean felt this overstepped and that. "Look, sweetie," Warren finally showed up because he owed Dean a heartfelt talk, delayed for 9 long years. Dean gently replied he never saw it as crossing lines. Handing over a mug by the grease-stained bench, Warren asked him, "Do you still hear these roaring engines the same way?" Dean nodded, yes. Warren fell silent, then muttered that such hidden automotive talent felt entirely wasted. He meant no harm. Dean quietly disagreed, not a waste. Just different, honest labor. They truly understood each other's souls. The shallow public side of the story hit with sudden, overwhelming force on Thursday when Naomi published Warren's complete truth, finally attaching Dean's humble name to that incredible, unseen legacy. The flashy supercar community's reaction was of the exact kind you see when a whispered legend proves real, carrying all the deep emotional weight everyone had secretly hoped for. A truth folks cautiously guarded their hearts against, just in case it was fake. The deep respect arrived fast, holding nothing back. Tyler Knox released a polished statement through the auto showroom's PR desk that was polite and kind, appearing to finally acknowledge Dean's unseen efforts, without naming what that hard work had been. It was the sort of empty corporate praise that pleased absolutely nobody, yet offended nobody either. Dean stayed quiet, offering no public words. "You and I know real worth isn't flashy." He was in his peaceful garage, Sadie was learning at school, and he simply repaired a Subaru's broken fuel system. Claire had visited his modest garage 3 times in the 10 days since that big supercar exhibition. She convinced herself it was just to manage the Ferrari North America details. But it was truly about deeper, unseen things she was quietly sorting through, carrying the brave self-awareness of someone who makes sharp professional judgments, knowing when her own personal growth was quietly overdue. She carried warm coffee every single visit. She even repaired a dripping sink in the back room, making a small, silent contribution unprompted. An act of unseen care she would have offered any building she was tasked to maintain. Yet here she worked with a tender focus that Dean quietly noticed, though he chose to let it remain unspoken. Leaving that Thursday afternoon, she stopped by the door. Ferrari is arriving next week, she said softly. I want you standing there. Dean promised he would consider it. His mind was already turning it over. Knowing his heart perfectly, she drove away. The Grand Ferrari North America track event unfolded at an exclusive hidden facility beyond the city. A sweeping 3-mile circuit featuring a long, back straightaway and tricky infield turns that quickly separated OK drivers from the true masters of the craft. On paper, this gathering was a product, testing showcase for media guests, partners, and hand-picked automotive engineering minds. Yet the true goal, felt by every soul there without a single spoken word, was quietly judging the legendary brand's newest hybrid supercar, watched by folks whose deep understanding would guide the legacy into its unseen future. This early machine was not the SF90. It was the masterpiece meant to replace the SF90. Only 3 of these rare creations existed so far. All 3 sat quietly at the track under the heavy, anxious guard reserved for hollow objects valued far higher than most people's family homes. The paper listed the lead driving role for the primary track tester as a highly respected pro, someone of true standing who, see this Ferrari, kiddo? He'd already poured his silent sweat into 2 older builds. His real name was not Dean. He brought Sadie to the supercar exhibition, turning heads, but Claire had quietly handled the snobs beforehand. Little Sadie was only 9. She watched everything carefully, never needing a babysitter, asking the kind of brilliant questions that made exhausted supercar mechanics smile instead of rolling their tired eyes. She wore the sturdy canvas jacket Dean gave her, tough material proudly carrying his quiet auto shop's name. She walked through that flashy paddock with the easy grace of a kid raised on hard work in dirty garages, far from luxury. She knew exactly where to stand, close enough to see the magic, never blocking a single mechanic's path. The Ferrari crew saw her sharp focus and instantly realized she was the daughter of a man whose true value lay in skill. You and I know titles matter little, but Tyler attended as a regional distributor. A perfectly legitimate role that he filled with the stiff posture of a man who clearly grasped that wealth could not buy what Dean earned, and Tyler saw he could never force a win over a man of true substance. He muttered a few words to Claire upon arriving. Claire kept it strictly polite. Tyler knew real power when he saw it, graciously stepping back to let a far better man take his well-deserved time in peace. Warren stood near the main technical tent, talking with 2 top Ferrari experts who deeply valued his quiet wisdom over any flashy display. The test driver finished 2 laps in the prototype, debriefing alongside the lead calibration boss just as Claire marched across the floor with the focus of a woman determined to honor a man's silent sacrifices cleanly. She gripped that shiny prototype key. The lead engineer watched her approach his priceless piece of machinery, looking terrified about what she might do with his pride and joy. His eyes locked tight onto the key in her grip. He traced her determined path toward the single father and began to realize real worth was finally being rewarded, seconds before it actually happened. Claire paused right before humble Dean. Now, let's picture this room. Thick with tension, full of wealthy folks desperately pretending they understood the real worth of the brilliant machines surrounding them. But Claire played no games. She stared right at Dean with the pure, honest respect of someone who knew a lifetime of quiet contribution demanded absolute truth. And she announced, her clear voice ringing out to the closest bystanders, if anyone here actually deserves this beautiful car, it is him. She tossed the key, a perfect, clean arc, honoring the silent, steady labor of his past. This time the good father caught it firmly. Perhaps because he finally recognized his own enduring value. The heavy quiet that followed held real respect, totally unlike the shallow launch event. That earlier pause belonged to rich people shocked by a sudden awkward social break. You and I know this stillness belonged to true experts recognizing that genuine, invisible sacrifices shape our world far more than money ever could. Everyone slowly woke up to the exact same truth. Warren simply beamed with pride. The test driver watched the stunning supercar with a deep expression that could have been mere professional calm, or perhaps a sudden, profound, lingering admiration. The lead calibration expert had dropped his concern and looked deeply inspired, which in proud engineers of his true gift is making those quiet, lasting changes. Dean approached the supercar prototype just like the SF90, no ego, no flashy show for the crowd. He moved with the quiet grace of a man picking up an old conversation, not proving his worth. Sliding into the driver's seat, he ran the complete pre-launch sequence purely from deep memory. He never even glanced at the notes. He didn't need to ask the calibration engineers anything. He simply closed his eyes, feeling the machine's pulse exactly the way a master musician waits, holding a prized instrument right before a symphony that has been brewing for years. Then he quietly shifted it into drive. Let's pause here. His lap times weren't record-breaking for this track or this machinery, simply because Dean Mercer wasn't trying to chase empty speed or flashy track records. Instead, what those Ferrari engineers obsessed over during their long debrief, and carefully documented inside the official vehicle program engineering notes, sent back to Maranello that night, was the stunning precision of his insights. Every single tuning note he gave was flawlessly, technically exact, and drilled right down into the deep powertrain code where the exact engine behavior actually lived. Phil Garrett, who watched the whole event while keeping completely quiet since launch day, leaned close to Warren Hale during the meeting and whispered, "He doesn't drive it just to hit the limit. He drives it to find out exactly where they messed up." Warren Hale nodded, "Yes," then added, "Nothing else. True mastery rarely needs more words." Dean quietly turned down the full-time offer Ferrari North America handed him 3 weeks later. He honestly weighed the choice. That alone was rare. He usually ignored it whenever the automotive industry came hunting for his talent, offering big roles he never had any intention of taking. For 4 days, he studied that offer exactly like he studies a complex engine block before tearing it apart, seeking the hidden truth inside it before making his final quiet move. He finally discussed it with Sadie one night by the workbench, while she carefully sharpened drill bits with the intense focus of a kid who learned that simple tools deserve the same deep respect as the supercars they fix. Sadie listened quietly, then asked him, "Do you want to go back?" Dean admitted he wasn't sure. She simply replied, "Then you don't." "You and I know the feeling." He watched her, realizing again, just as he had for 9 quiet years, that his young daughter saw life's true priorities far clearer than he did. He quietly built a consulting deal with Ferrari North America, built with absolute precision around the unseen things that really mattered. Remote diagnostic work he could easily handle right from his shop. Occasional track visits perfectly timed around his little girl's school schedule, plus the freedom to reject any project that threatened the quiet, meaningful life he had so carefully built for them. Clare Vaughn was heavily involved in the negotiations as the Vaughn Performance Group's regional partner, and she fought for his terms with a sharp focus, proving she had truly understood his quiet fatherly duties, never even needing him to explain his real priorities. Dean silently noticed this. Real value lives in actions. He didn't say a word, just quietly brewed her coffee on her next visit. The morning coffee carried extra unspoken care. For souls who speak through acts of service, that simple cup meant everything. It was a quiet offering holding a weight of love they both completely understood without a single spoken word. The humble garage kept turning. Familiar faces remained. That timeless afternoon sun washed over the open bay doors. The usual radio played. It usually played classic rock. Sadie hated that, regularly swapping it out to play some deep-dive audio show about vintage engineering she loved. Ed Dean always listened, hiding his profound pride behind the gentle mask of a man pretending to ignore her. Sadie now claimed her own beautifully stocked little work table. She handled tools with profound, steady grace. It was the undeniable proof of a father who had quietly, patiently guided her hands right from the start. She knew true mastery demanded a slow, unseen investment of time. She was meticulously building a miniature motor, gathering its tiny parts from 3 completely separate vendors over time, slowly piecing it together. Studying an adult engineering guide, absorbing complex truths with effortless ease. Dean quietly observed her from the shadows sometimes. You and I recognize that look. It's a father realizing his greatest, unseen labor has finally forged a beautiful spirit that will outlive his darkest, fleeting fears. Claire stepped into their quiet sanctuary one late Thursday afternoon. Arriving in a stunning Rosso Corsa SF90 Ferrari supercar, casually taken from a showroom floor, pulling up with the approval of absolutely nobody. She simply owned the dealership, making all formal permission completely irrelevant. She let the exotic machine idle right outside the shops, fading golden light of an autumn dusk, stepping out to lean against the frame with the relaxed stance of a wealthy woman so used to owning breathtaking cars that material luxury no longer demanded any real reverence. Little Sadie simply glanced up from her quiet workspace, plainly muttering, "Nice ride," and honestly coming from this young mechanic, that meant a sincere, hard-earned verdict, not mere politeness. Dean quietly cleaned his wrenches, honoring his humble craft as he always closed out the evening. He studied the gleaming Ferrari, glanced over at Claire, and then turned his eyes back, staring at that supercar with a haunting look his daughter had perfectly diagnosed long ago. We've all seen that gaze, a man silently grieving a distant memory. Claire slowly unclipped the sleek key fob from her wrist, moving with the deliberate, graceful patience of someone returning a piece of history, ready to savor his reaction. She met Dean's eyes softly. "Still yours?" Claire whispered. Dean just gazed at Sadie. Sadie rested her small tools down, observing her dad with the profound, quiet wisdom of a cherished daughter who already understood what truly mattered most. He stared at the supercar, then turned toward his humble garage, its faded pictures, its fading autumn light, and the enduring legacy he had silently built inside these walls. "Only when she lets me borrow it," he softly replied. Claire tossed the keys, a fleeting prize caught.